Hello! Welcome to a video. Today I am answering your questions about my traumatic childhood. If you haven't seen my other videos on the topic, I would recommend those. I went into a lot of detail specifically in my trauma iceberg video, but these questions come from the comment section, so these are things I have not answered yet. I want to thank everyone whose comments and questions I'm responding to today. Thank you for being interested in my story and giving me these prompts to dig into certain topics a little deeper. But whether you're here from my other videos or if this is your first time watching, welcome and thank you for being here. Unlike my first reading comments video, this one is completely unscripted. I haven't responded to these or really thought about the answers. I just saved a bunch of comments and I'm reacting to them in real time. With all that said, let's get into the questions. Our first comment is, where did you sleep and eat? Just curious, sorry you went through this. Thank you. So I both slept and ate in the one room that I was confined to, which had a usable floor space of about 5 by 8 feet. All the other space in the room was taken up by hoarded junk. For the sleeping arrangement, we had one, large sheet that we would roll out, and then on top of that, I don't know exactly what it was. I think it was just a remnant of fabric that we would also roll out that was like a thicker canvas type fabric that just covered the carpet. And that floor situation would be on the floor for sleeping time. And then on top of that, we would arrange a few pillows that we had. These weren't normal or thick. I don't even know really what type of pillows they are other than maybe body pillows. They were thin, large rectangles, and we would roll those down as a pillow to, lay the majority of our bodies on. And then we just had other random pillows that we would arrange however, my sister and I wanted for our own head and neck comfort. We got to arrange our pillows the way we wanted. And then when it was time to be awake, that would be rolled up and stacked somewhere, usually on top of some of the stacks of newspapers. And then we would have the whole entire 5 by 8 floor space to exist on. So that is where I would sit and read, draw, play, whatever, different things at different stages through my life. And then when it was time to eat, those two bits of fabric would be rolled up to one end of the room, and then we would just have carpet exposed. And of course, you can't eat on carpet. We're not crazy here. So on top of that, every once in a while, my mother would bring home plastic wrapping and bags, huge plastic bags that she would get from her work at a shipping warehouse. And so those bags, we would lay them out as a square on the carpet and kind of tuck it into the corners of the newspaper and everything to make it really nice and smooth and classy. And then on top of that, we would lay a strip of paper towels. Later, we got placemats. That was a big day for me. I was excited that we actually had placemats, and we would just kind of organize those on top of the tarp bag from a shipping warehouse. And then on top of those placemats or paper towels, we would put the various pots and pans and trays that my parents would bring from the kitchen. Instead of plating things in the kitchen and just bringing us the food, everything would be brought into the bedroom. So you would have a pot of hot water with, boiled vegetables in it. And that would just be placed on a hot pad on a placemat, and then we would serve out of it. So it kept everything warm, was the idea. But it was also just precarious, and there were, hot trays and things just sitting in front of our legs, and everyone just sat crisscross on the floor around it and ate. This is something I hadn't actually thought about in a long time, but as I'm thinking of it now, I am remembering that my father didn't feed himself much. My memory could be a little hazy on this, so I don't know if he maybe used to feed himself, but then as he developed arthritis in his hands, he didn't want to feed himself and hold dishes anymore. So my mother or my sister would basically spoon feed him, so he didn't have to hurt himself. And then they would, get to take bites in between his bites. So I hope that conveys it and makes it a little easier to picture. And thank you for asking that, because I just remembered something that I hadn't thought of in, basically since I left. Our next comment is, size 2 feet. I want to see. If you really want to find them, you can find them. It doesn't even take that much effort, but they're not in this video. Next question. I'd really be interested in how it affected your relationship. My first long-term relationship was disastrous, and the ones since haven't been what they could be because of how I was raised. The way it affected my first adult relationship is I had no business being in an adult relationship when I got into one. My mother and I moved out when I was 16, and that was the beginning of my learning to have social interactions with my peers. Before that, I had had some online friends, and that somewhat taught me how to engage with people, but I had no real-life experience being around people my age, or people in general. The only people I had really learned how to socialize with were my relatives and my doctors. So I was 16 when I started doing that. It's not like I had an active social life either, because I didn't have means to really make friends my age, other than I met a few people and tried to hang out with them, but I was still limited in my ability to spend time with them because I was still reliant on my mother taking me places, and she didn't like to let me go anywhere alone because I was so fresh out, and she was just very helicopter about it. So by the time I was 18, I still had less than 2 years of real social skills development, and that was so very limited. And then the day after I turned 18, I met a man in his 40s. I added him on Facebook, I started talking to him, and he started talking to me. I was trying to flirt to the best of my ability. He was receptive to it, he was flirting back. And a few days after we started talking, he proposed my moving in with him to be his live-in maid. And yes, this was said in jest, but it was just the way that he proposed me moving in with him. So I said, yeah, screw it. I'll move across the country for this man that I met once and had only known and, been talking to for, by the time I really decided to do it, a few months. I couldn't drive. I'm 18. I have nothing going for me here. I have no education, no job, no prospects, no skills. I want to do all these big things with my life. I want to go places. And there's no avenues for that where I was. I was in the middle of Central Florida. I was just very stuck there. And so I got very excited about the idea of moving up to a bigger city, moving in with someone who seemed to really have their life together and be doing all these cool things. And there's a lot about it that I'm not going to get into while just trying to answer this question. But the way my childhood affected that relationship is that I went into it knowing nothing about what a healthy relationship looks like, what is reasonable to expect out of a relationship. I just had no social skills, no life experience, no dating experience. I'd never had anything resembling a relationship before that point, and then suddenly I was in a cohabitating relationship. I was very insecure. I was out of my depth. I was at a huge disadvantage mentally. And so, like this comment referred to their own relationship, it was disastrous. And now 10 years later, I'm only now starting to learn what it is to live as an independent adult. Someone actually messaged me recently saying they went through a similar upbringing and are now about to turn 18 and asked if I had any advice for them entering adult life. And my biggest piece of advice was just don't do what I did. Become a whole adult first. Learn how to take care of yourself and how to make connections before diving into anything super serious. I didn't know how to set boundaries. I didn't know how to set expectations. I didn't know how to communicate. I didn't know what was reasonable for me to ask for in a relationship. There were so many things that I took as normal and completely acceptable that weren't, because I had no reference to draw from on what a relationship should be or what I wanted from a relationship. I also had no options to take a break, take the relationship slow, or end the relationship, because despite the fact that before I moved, my mother told me that if it didn't work out, I could always come back home and everything would be fine. A couple weeks after I moved out, she told me that she had decided to sell the house that she and I lived in, to move into her friend's spare room, and to rehome the pets that we had together. And so suddenly there was nothing to go back to if I decided that I didn't want to be there with him anymore. And thankfully for my mental well-being at the time, I didn't want to return home. See, this is the fun thing about answering other people's questions, is it prompts me to think about things that I wouldn't actively consider. And I feel like the fact that I had no option to return home made me just completely block that thought in my mind of ever wanting to leave, because there was no option at that point to leave. And if I let myself decide that I wanted to leave when I couldn't, that would have been too much to deal with, because I had just gotten out of a situation that I wanted to get out of and felt like I couldn't escape. So when she removed the ability for me to come back home, my mind made it unfathomable to leave the relationship. Anyway, don't do what I did. Look out for yourselves. Become independent people before you get into a relationship where you're dependent on someone. Next question. What happened to your sister after you left? Is she okay? I don't know if I missed it in the video. I don't plan to get too much into any of the details about my sister's life, because that is her business to talk about. But to my knowledge, she is okay. She moved out after I moved out. She has her own life. She seems fulfilled and happy. We're living very different lives. We're both just doing what we feel is best for us. And so I am happy for her, and yeah, I think she's doing all right. I have a further question. What did a typical day in the life look like for you? I'm having a bit of a hard time picturing it, if that makes sense. Regardless, I wish you the best. Thank you. It's hard for me to recall a standard day, because a lot of the days just blur together. Aside from traumatic things standing out, there were a lot of days just spent doing the same thing over and over again, and it wasn't unique, but there also wasn't a structure, if that makes sense. There was no morning routine, there was no, well, we have to be up at this time to get to school to do this. But we would typically sleep for 9 hours, we would wake up sometime in the afternoon, I would be taken to the bathroom by one of my parents, and it was usually my father. There was no morning bathroom routine like brushing teeth, showering, any of that, so afterwards I would just be placed back into my room, and typically my father and sister would spend a lot of the daylight hours outside doing yard work. He would also go out shopping a lot to fuel his hoarding, or he would spend a lot of time in the kitchen preparing the one big meal for the day. Sometimes things would be brought into my room to help with the food prep, like minor things like making a salad. We would have like a picnic blanket that we would put down, and then cutting boards and things and prepare the salad on top of that. The TV was always on for a lot of my teens, but we only had 4 channels, so whatever was on wasn't necessarily something that I actively wanted to watch. It was just the best option out of whatever the 4 channels were playing at the time. And if my father wasn't off doing other things, he would also spend time in that room reading or watching TV or kind of just existing around us. He would have me look things up for him on my laptop, and that's again later in my teens. A lot of the day's effort was put into that one big meal for the day. The meal itself wasn't a quick process either, and it was typically served in 2 sessions with time in between to reheat the pots and pans and trays. And then after the meal, we would get ready for bed, which just meant getting the food set up out of the way, rolling out the bed setup, putting pillows down on the floor, being taken to the bathroom again one last time, and going to sleep again. I've been looking forward to answering this comment for weeks. I'm so excited to finally get to it. So this comment says, notice the tiny Lex Luthor in the background? I really like his character. I have many. I have so many tiny Lex in the background. There's also one down here, but this is my main shelf of my multiple Lexes and Supergirls. And specifically for you, I'm working on a video essay about them. So stay tuned if you're interested to hear that. I'm very excited to get that one out. But let's get to the rest of your question. So I'm curious, have you ever noticed yourself projecting your experiences onto characters or people or interact with media in a way that's atypical? Has it gotten you into trouble, mental, physical, or otherwise, during your abuse or later in life, or taught you something valuable? This is a very complex question, so I hope I can answer it properly, because in my head I do have all of these answers somewhere. So I've absolutely projected my experiences onto characters that I like in a slight way. I don't think I've done it in a large way, because I would rather picture myself as a character than picture a character as me. So I don't want a character that I like to have all of my traits or be too similar to me, because then I don't see that as a character, then it's just me. One thing that I remember, and what honestly made me have such a strong draw to the character of Supergirl, was seeing a portrayal of her where her father was villainous. And that's not a common portrayal for that character. So I liked that because I was able to relate to it, and I was like, oh, she also has an awful father? I love that. And that's not something I consider the main thing. It is just a little thing that drew me to her when I was a child and still in that situation, and definitely made me imprint on her a little more. As far as interacting with media in a way that's atypical, I might, just by being very intensely into media and into characters, and that's, I don't know that that's atypical of a fan of anything. I think being a fan of something requires you to be a little bit abnormal and atypical about it, because you can't really just say, I love this thing so much, I'm so normal about it. Like, that itself is a joke, to say, I feel so normal about this thing that I love. I'm not normal about it. I'm not normal about Lex Luthor. So I guess I engage with media in a way that's atypical, maybe of what mainstream viewers would do, but I don't think it's atypical in relation to other fans. Like, there are certain versions of the character of Supergirl that I heavily relate to. And so when I enjoy something, instead of picturing myself in that universe, or even really relating to one of the characters from that thing, my first instinct will be to place her in that universe. And that might be a somewhat atypical way of engaging with media, but It's not something that's ever gotten me in trouble. I don't think it's harmful. It's just, I love a crossover, and I love her as a character, and I think she's very adaptable and works in a lot of different situations. So if I love something, I'm just gonna plop her into it and just think about how she would fit into it. And I don't even make anything of it a lot of the time, though I am trying to get more into actually expressing that through art or writing or whatever, because it is harmless and it is something that I love doing. But no, thankfully, despite the fact that media was so important and foundational to me during that hard time, I don't think I developed any abnormal coping mechanisms using it. I'm declaring myself normal. The last part of that question was, and most importantly, do you have any OCs or characters in pop media that you like a lot? Yes, so many, too many to list, but as I've said earlier in this answer, I clearly love Supergirl a lot, I love Lex Luthor a lot, I love this guy. I love too many things and characters to list here. Here's a bunch of my favorite characters. I spent a while making this graphic. I have like one original character who is very much similar to me. She's just a cooler version of me, but I will put her in things as well and just think about how she would interact in that world. I do want to do a video focusing specifically on how media and pop culture has helped me through different times of my life, from just being an escape while I was going through hard times to how certain characters shaped my morals and made me want to be a better person while I wasn't really being taught that from my parents. How some songs became the soundtrack of different realizations and healing. How I've made so many connections through shared passions, and how characters and media and music is still helping me to this day. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned, because boy do I love to yap about the things I love. Thank you so much for that question. That genuinely made my day, and I hope you'll stick around for my video on these two. Though in the meantime, I did just post a video talking about my first media hyperfixation and how that affected me as a child and how I'm engaging with it today. So if you are curious about my relationship with pop culture and how it relates to my trauma, check that one out. This comment says, I have childhood trauma from a wide mix of things, though it is severely different from you in that I was lucky to be able to get out of the house, even if heavily discouraged. I want to know if you've ever struggled with agoraphobia, or even the opposite of being scared to go to your safe home. Thankfully, no. I was always very excited whenever I would get to go out of the house, and so I think that just continued throughout my life. The only time I experienced anxiety about going places was the first time that I was invited to go to LA. Even though I had flown many times before, something about going that far for a social event felt too big at the time, but I still went ahead and did it. It was amazing, and now I no longer have that anxiety of taking a flight to a faraway place. I've also realized that I do like small spaces. For some reason, I really like climbing into small things. Like, I've never played hide and seek, but I think I would be amazing at it because I like climbing into, cabinets, closets, just small spaces. I do like it, which is strange, all things considered, but I'm very glad that I had that takeaway as opposed to being afraid of it. How do you stay so calm and collected? I mean in general, but especially when talking about such a traumatic experience. How do you do it? I could never. I'd be so angry I'd lose the ability to talk. I'm getting angry just thinking about what they did to you, and I'm a total stranger. Thank you for your empathy that is making you feel that anger, but I think my circumstances definitely trained me to not be reactive and to keep my cool and just process things internally before processing them externally as a survival mechanism. I spent so much time just keeping my head down and getting through it that now I don't really have to try very hard to keep that composure. I've always said I wouldn't change anything about my life, despite the fact it should not have happened that way. And I completely believe that. There's so many things that I've been able to learn from and turn into something positive. And I think having restraint and composure is a really positive thing that came out of that upbringing. I did not hear you address this. How did they communicate to you that you were not allowed to leave? And was there ever a time that you had more free reign of the house and then they suddenly restricted it? Or was it just treated as such a strong norm from birth that if you came out of the room, they disapprovingly said, "What are you doing out here?" Did they ever say in words you were not allowed to leave your room except under XYZ circumstances? Or would that have been stupid because it was so obvious from context? I don't distinctly remember either of my parents telling me that I couldn't leave the room. Most of the rules were conveyed to me by my sister, and I don't know that she was given rules either. I think a lot of the rules were only enforced and found out about once they were broken. But once my sister knew the rules, she told them to me, so I was able to avoid breaking a lot of rules by already knowing them. And the biggest rule was never leave the room. I had experienced enough violent punishments even as a toddler to understand that that was just not something that I wanted to risk. So it was never told to me specifically. I was never told why. I don't even know that I was told that I could leave under, emergency circumstances. I think that was just kind of you're expected to know if there's a fire to get out of the house. But yeah, it was literally just ingrained into me as early as I was able to comprehend anything to not leave the room. Even with the door open, there was no gate on it, there was no lock, it was never closed. Even when I was home alone, even when I technically knew that no one was inside, I would not dare to leave the room because the most terrifying thing I could imagine was being discovered out of it. When you got out, were you able to get a job/function in humanity having not been schooled? I know a lot of opportunities depend on having completed high set. I don't know what that is because I've never taken it. Or graduating from a normal school. So I did apply for a couple jobs in my hometown when I was around 17. I remember applying for a job at Waffle House and being very disappointed that I didn't get it. I could have been on such a different path if I had just gotten that Waffle House job, and then I wouldn't be here. But after I was 18, I met the man that I ended up moving in with and moved across the country. I didn't know how to go about getting a job at that point, and I think about a year after moving in, I was able to apply for a job that I really enjoyed. I ended up getting a job at a dog daycare, but I ended up having to leave that job because I couldn't physically handle it with the health issues that I was having at the time. After I left that job, I ended up working for the man that I had moved in with, and I ended up doing that for most of my 20s. And by working for, I mean I learned a bunch of skills and did whatever stuff needed to be done for a business that I thought we were building together, but I also wasn't being compensated for anything, so I didn't have time to really get another job because I was busy working for him, but then I didn't have my own money or savings or anything. So, like I said earlier, don't do what I did. I think I'm missing something. What did they feed you? Honestly, normal stuff. Like we had pretty normal meals, just the structure of the eating wasn't normal. Like, we would have kind of like themed nights. There would be a night that was sort of breakfast food, like there would be pancakes and scrambled eggs and all that. There was Italian night, there was Chinese night, there was Mexican night, there was like comfort food, rotisserie chicken night. So I ate pretty normal stuff. Just the structure of it and the amount and frequency of food is what was a problem. If you were in the same room as your father right now, what would you do? What would you say to him, if anything at all? Leave? I would leave. That would be my first goal, would just be to leave the room. I don't want to be around him. I don't want to share a space with him. I don't want to talk to him. I feel like I've said everything that I ever need to say to him already when I was 17, and that was the last time I spoke to him. So I would just not want to be there. There's nothing else that I feel like I have to get off my chest. There's nothing that I want to know from him. There's nothing that I want to do with him. Editing May here. So I somehow shot 3 hours of footage answering questions. So the rest of the questions are going to be in a separate video. Let's go to the outro. That is all the questions that I had saved for today. Thank you to everyone for asking them, for being curious about my life, for giving me things to talk about and think about, and honestly, I am thinking about some things in a new way just because of these questions prompting me to pull those memories back up. That is why I like talking about my experiences, because talking about it does help me figure it out. So please, feel free to ask anything that you're curious about. Just be nosy. I really don't mind, and if I do mind, I just won't answer it. Anyway, I have other videos on my trauma. I have lighthearted videos. I have an ASMR channel. I have a lot of different types of content, so if you're looking for something similar or something new, I'm sure you can find it. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!